Yeah, it was a dream of ours developed through or in our shared university time, and the dream grew. It became more concrete, and it ended up being Diamond Earth running. Yeah, a lot of circumstances that favored doing it in a DA50. It was the aircraft's owner, Fritz, who was interested in purchasing the platform. It was Diamond, which was willing to support us with the undertaking, and yeah, it was our motivation of doing it. So all three parties agreed on partnering together, and that's when we got airborne.
Well, it probably got motivated from people who have already done it. Matt Miller, for example. We watched his videos during university time and also scrolled through Google Earth looking for remote islands and whether they had an airport or not. And yeah, just scheduling a route just for fun, and then it developed into a more concrete idea. I started flying in 2013. By now I'm a professional helicopter pilot. I fly for the Air Force. So flying planes at that stage is basically my hobby, which I, however, still enjoy very much.
I also started flying as a private pilot in 2013, then did some academics, but decided just before COVID to try to become an airline pilot. Obviously, that plan was put on hold through because of the pandemic, but yeah, it's likely that it will restart after our Earth rounding will finish. The DA50 was one of the options the owner had, Fritz, in choosing a single engine piston for mainly recreational use, however, with also the option of having an IFR platform. The availability of the plane plus the cabin size was probably two of the main selling points at that stage, and we were lucky enough to support Fritz in the purchasing process, also in the evaluation process, but now also in the ownership process of having such a machine under his name. So yeah, as a way of saying thank you, he allowed us to take his baby for a spin.
Yeah, for us it's a really good platform to do the venture we are currently undertaking to do that in. I mean, the Jet A capability just makes it easier regarding availability of fuel in remote areas. The cabin space that Matt mentioned allowed us to not care too much about what we were going to take. We still had, of course, a strict packing list, but I guess the DA50 made it easier than with other aircraft and their baggage space.
And the fuel efficiency, at the end of the day, it was a bit of a game changer. We didn't need to carry that much extra fuel for the really long legs, burning just 10 US gallons and doing 160 knots true airspeed. And yeah, what we found flying it almost now 80% around the world is that the figures, the real world figures, are quite a bit better than the book figures Diamond advertises. So they're definitely not overselling the aircraft, and yeah, we're living proof that that's the case.
Yeah, quite impressive. And also modern avionics that, didn't make it easy, but just helped with flying IFR all around the world with different weather systems.
Yeah, climb performance was one. We mainly saw it with exceeding the book figures in cruise performance. That is with the power setting or the load setting in Diamonds, which you regulate the load or power lever. You regulate the engine. We got at certain settings less fuel burn and more true air speed, so it worked good in both ends. And talking about 3 to 5 knots better than what we had in the books.
Yeah, I mean, it's more or less it's the configuration that you would get if you just buy a DA50 off the shelf. Of course, for the very long legs, we had a ferry tank with us that was installed on the back seats. But apart from that, we did not reconfigure the aircraft.
So we used two types of ferry tanks, both of them collapsible. One is a 33 US gallon total capacity turtle pack, and the other one is a 100 gallon turtle pack tank, which were both connected to a pump kit, and that pump kit fed into the left-hand wing tank of the DA50, which is your main wing tank or fuel tank, which the engine actually takes the fuel from. So with regular diamond operating procedures, you pump fuel from the right-hand tank into the left-hand tank. You do that, you can do it, or you can wait until you reach the maximum imbalance of 9 US gallons. What we did is, instead of then taking it from the right-hand tank, we took it from the ferry tank sitting in the back and putting it into the left-hand tank. So basically our right-hand tank was not touched until the ferry tank was completely depleted. And with the burning rates we had, talking 10 gallons, 9 gallons, so we were, every hour we kept the fuel transfer on, and took about 20 minutes to replenish the fuel into the left-hand fuel tank.
Well, the longest legs that we did were the ones to Hawaii, and then from Hawaii to mainland California, and we were flying for 13 hours, for one even a little bit more, and we still had more than 2 hours of endurance when we landed. Yeah, exactly. We departed Zurich January 2nd, 2022. We crossed Central Europe down to the Mediterranean, crossed that to Egypt, the only country that we touched on the African planet, then the Middle East, over to Pakistan, India, and then down to Thailand, where we had a maintenance stop. Continued on Malaysia, and then from there on it was crossing the Pacific through mainly US islands, so we passed Guam and Hawaii. We finally arrived in California, and from there on we crossed the Rockies to Denver, down south to Dallas, where we had maintenance again, and then we did the loop through Latin America, so we were in Mexico, Costa Rica, touched South America just once in Colombia, and then the Caribbean up again, through the Dominican Republic, Bahamas, back to Florida, where we are now. The plan is to then follow the East Coast and through the classic route, Canada, Greenland, Iceland, Scotland, back to Europe.
So we, in India, it was the first stop in India coming from Pakistan. We were approaching Ahmedabad, and we were informed by Tower to watch out for kites, and we took it seriously. We said, let's look outside and pay some extra attention. And I think we were shooting an RNAV into one of the runways, and just ended up not being able to follow any vertical component of the approach, because there were so many kites that we ended up flying quite high towards the airport and dived down in the last moment just to avoid the kites. And even by doing so, we were steering left and right, flying slalom around them. So that was crazy, and we cannot really imagine how an airliner would have done it. Obviously, with the single engine piston, especially the DA50, you can dive down in the last moment and still make it. But we made sure then during the departure that we kept it steep.
Well, the availability of fuel is obviously, because it's running on jet fuel, that was never an issue, because all those places are, at least I'd say once a week are served by commercial air traffic, so they have fuel available. Services, it was available all over. Prices and exact services that they provide were different all over the world. That was one of the experiences that we had, that on the ground there's a big difference whether you fly in certain parts of the world. Once you are in the air, it's quite well standardized. Probably be again India, which was just to even get a handling agent that would handle our flight, which is mandatory to have one, was quite a task, because it's just not, I guess it's just not common to have a GA traffic flying through there. They're just not used to that kind of traffic over there. Fuel really was never an issue. I mean, they have Jet A, and we use that.
Mexico was also interesting in terms of the papers
Yeah.
and permits and the flow of papers required, physical papers, before you're able to depart. So yeah, you visit a lot of offices before you can go and see the aircraft and pre-flight it for the departure. So yeah, we did a combination of for-flight nav locks and then the update sent through Garmin Connect into the cockpit to give us really a good indication on what the headwind or hopefully tailwind component was. Difficult over the Pacific was areas of precipitation. Obviously you don't have an X-rad or any of these features, and that was in terms of not just precipitation, visible moisture in general because of icing for such long legs, something you want to avoid. And especially at nighttime, we were dependent on then having also the mission supporter of Swiss giving us a heads up on what's laying ahead of us.
Yeah, we for the flight from Guam to Hawaii, we used the Marshall Islands as a stopover point, but we were not allowed to actually enter the country, so we were only allowed a technical stop, which meant that we not only had to plan the first 12-hour flight and look through the weather that is there, but also the following 13-hour flight to Hawaii, which had to be like hours later. So we were actually looking at the period of over 24 hours and all the weather that could happen there, and it had to work because we were, as I said, not allowed to overnight in Majuro, Marshall Islands.
Yeah, it is a new engine, and we've done our necessary training, which we deemed reasonable. I was able to spend 5 days up in Germany with Continental to see how the engines are produced, but also get a more in-depth understanding of the operating principles, which was useful in understanding it. And luckily we never had to use it for troubleshooting because the engine, from departing Zurich until now, don't want to jinx it, but we weren't thrown any issues at us at all. No sensor related indications. Really just hopped in, put on the engine master, waited for the glow to finish and threw on the engine, and it did it in so many different climate zones, so many different elevations. It worked the same down in Dallas as it did in Toluca, which in Mexico City, 9,000 feet. And that's impressive.
Yeah.
Hot start's not an issue,
Yeah.
so yeah.
I mean, the temperature range of all the relevant temperatures was within probably 5 degrees Celsius, although we were, as Matt told, flying in many different climate zones. That was impressive.
Yeah, it's actually, you don't get complacent, but we had to remind ourselves to, even though the engine indications didn't change ever, to look at them every hour at least over the Pacific, and we always got the same sound. We didn't get any vibrations from the engine, so that was rather calming. But yeah, we also had to make sure, hey, even if it's well behaving, let's just check if it really is, and it was. And talking about fuel efficiency, it really is a remarkable engine, but also what we can say in terms of oil consumption, it's crazy. Up until we left Zurich, we filled in 2 liters of oil, and yeah, we've flown 170, 165 hours maybe on the engine, and 2 liters. So that's quite remarkable.
I never got myself to go down that path, but flying over the Pacific at night for me was a special experience anyways, even without thinking about the engine and the possibilities with it. But yeah, we tend to depart close to midnight, like a half an hour after midnight, into the night, just to be sure, on one hand, to be able to land during daylight, just to fight fatigue. And on the other hand, we figured that if we had a problem with fuel, it would come till the end of the flight, and we wanted to have the end of the flight by daylight. Well, we were carrying some survival equipment, obviously. So we have a life raft that would fit 4 people. We have that in the back seat. For legs over cold water, we were also wearing dry suits, immersion suits that would protect us from getting wet and would just make our chances of survival a little bit bigger if we don't get into the raft. We were also carrying PLBs, personal locator beacon, in addition to the ELT that the aircraft obviously already has built in.
We had a secondary satellite phone just as a backup in case we landed somewhere where the plane's satellite, built-in satellite, was no longer working. With the life raft and the immersion suits, we also had life vests, obviously.
Yeah, of course.
We had the factory training at Diamond. That was 4 days of flying, but also classroom related training. We did sea survival training. Robin, obviously being an Air Force pilot, he had that from his profession, but I had to get up to speed with how to exit such a craft if it's underwater, and that was some eye openers there for me personally.
So different if you want to exit a helicopter from an aircraft, so it was also good for me, and also to know how to work together in such a situation. So based on that training, we then did our own ditching checklist, what each person, like divided work, would do in case we had to ditch, to use the time frame we have from gliding, to use that as good as possible.
Probably we would do less stops with just one night, and more where we would just do a technical stop and then do 2 nights at the different place. We just realized there's a lot of time that gets lost with all the logistics involved, from egress and access to the aircraft. Transportation, especially when you're in countries where you might want to add an extra half an hour or hour just to make sure you get your departure time. So yeah, that's probably one of the things I would change from planning the schedule.
Yeah. Apart from that, not too much. I mean, a lot of people ask us, "Hey, why did you depart in winter time?" Looking at the weather in Europe, I get that question. But if you look at the whole picture, the whole world, I think it's quite a good time to depart. You avoid monsoon in some parts of the world. You avoid hurricanes in North America. So yeah, I would not change the date of departure.
Yeah, and also we, of course, chosen a route that works with the time of year we did it, but I agree with Robin, in a lot of parts of the world we were able to avoid the nasty seasons.